Will Mbappe agree to move this summer? How will Real Madrid line up in the new season? Will Bayern Munich have to continue without a striker for another season? Find out on this episode of the Football Rundown. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Football Rundown. I'm here with Shan again. Hey, Shan, how you doing?
I'm good. Kind of excited of how things are moving right now.
Of course, there's so many different things happening in the transfer market right now. I feel like it's in full swing. We wanted to cover the Women's World Cup, but I feel like there's just so much to cover on the transfer right now. It's hard to go to the Women's World Cup, but hopefully in the next few weeks we'll get there once the tournament starts. I think we should start with the saga of this transfer season. Well, I feel like it has been going on for the last couple of years, and that is the transfer of Mbappe. So obviously, for people who haven't followed it so closely, Mbappe a few weeks back notified PSG that he won't be triggering his option to extend the contract for another year, which basically means he has one more year left with PSG, after which he can leave for free. Obviously, that's not ideal for PSG, and PSG have been trying to convince him to sign a contract or leave this season or during this transfer window so that they can recoup some of the money that they have invested. So far, PSG has given him a deadline till the end of this month to decide whether he wants to renew his contract. If he doesn't, they will, or at least the official line is that they will do everything to try and sell Mbappe before the transfer window closes. Now, how are you feeling about that, Shan? This seems to be a drama that's been going on for ages, and it's such a weird scenario. It's something we don't really see very often in football.
Absolutely. Look, the Mbappe Saga, I don't know how or when this will end, but it's been going on for a while, and I can't surely say that things are not looking too good for PSG. As you know, a player cannot have the upper hand over a club. A player is not bigger than a club, even if it's PSG. And I personally feel that PSG has given so much power to Mbappe that he is the one negotiating everything. He is the one who decides if he wants to stay or go. He is the one who's deciding if he wants to sign a new contract or not. At the same time, he has this leverage over PSG that even if he stays, let's just say he decides he wants to pin down a new contract, right? But then again, that contract will need to be a much better contract for him from PSG. Not saying that PSG already gave him a really good contract last year. And this is a kind of drama that has been going on. And I should say Mbappe's agent, like his mom, is a very good negotiator. And I honestly believe that she is actually acting on behalf of Mbappe at least 100% to his favor. And that's what surprises me. Like PSG is actually kind of in a position where they have to accept whatever decision Mbappe takes.
It almost feels like that. It's very strange. I mean, from Mbappe's perspective, I feel like he has all the power right now, especially with his transfer, because if he doesn't want to move and he wants to move as a free next season, there's nothing really that PSG can do. Obviously, they can try and put him on the shop window to sell him to other clubs. But even then, the question then becomes, how much for? I don't think even with just a year left, PSG would be willing to let him go anywhere below 150 million. So there's not many clubs who can really afford him in this window. I don't think City is in a position to go and make that sort of transfer. Bayern, I don't think they are as willing to get or spend that sort of money, or historically, at least Bayern haven't. Barca definitely is not in a position. There were talks about Liverpool putting in an offer for 200 million, but I highly doubt that is realistic, especially given their transfer spending and the sort of spending that we have seen from Liverpool in the past. Now, that only leaves Madrid, who has already obviously spent about 100 million on Bellingham, another 25-30 million on Arda Güler. It really makes it very tricky for PSG to sell Mbappe. Obviously, Saudi might be an option, but I don't think Mbappe would be willing to move to Saudi at this point of his career. So if it only leaves Madrid, that puts a lot of bargaining power on Madrid's hand as well. And it's quite obvious that Mbappe wants to move to Madrid. And that is, I think, another reason why other clubs aren't really interested in putting in an offer, knowing Mbappe's intentions. So from a PSG standpoint, they can obviously put deadlines here and there, but I don't think that really moves anything or changes the situation at all. There was a report that I came across earlier today, which said that PSG has told Madrid, PSG has told Mbappe that if he leaves on a free, if he does not extend and continues to play at PSG, then PSG will have to sell some of his teammates to get some money so that they can continue their transfer business, not just for this season, also for future seasons. Obviously, they have to balance the books for FFP. I think the same report also said that Mbappe is on something like a couple of $1 million a week or something like that, which is ridiculous to me. Apparently, he's the highest paid sportsman, not just in football, like any sport, which to me sounds ridiculous. I mean, definitely, I do think Mbappe is a good player, but even then, that seems outrageous.
Look, it definitely is. As I said, he has been given way too much power and way too much salary in regards to his age, in regards to quite a lot of things, which actually comes back to the same thing that Mbappe, he feels superior to everyone else. As you said, he is the most paid sportsman right now in the world. So it basically comes to that point that he definitely feels that he is superior than the club itself. And at this point, I know Madrid has their hands tied as well because of all the transfers they've made this summer, saying that I do not think Madrid has that budget to meet around 200 million. And on top of that, if they're paying his salaries, which is quite high. I mean, I don't think Mbappe is going to take a salary cut to go to Madrid. Mbappe is in a really tricky situation right now. I kind of feel that he might actually stay put in PSG. He might this is just a drama that's going on just to get a better contract.
I don't think PSG is able to pay him more than what they're currently paying him, given FFP, given that they obviously need to invest in other parts of the team. It is unthinkable that they would be able to do it. Also, you have to think about the fact that if he continues, Mbappe that is, without extending the contract, and clearly in that scenario, telling everyone that he will leave for free at the end of next season, how would the fans react? Because PSG fans are quite passionate about the club, and rightly so. They have a good group of players. They play a decent brand of football. They have had some big names in football come through their door. And it's almost the disloyalty of Mbappe in this whole thing. I would be surprised if the fans don't turn on him when the season starts. And how would Mbappe react to that? Or how does that come into play in his whole decision-making process? Because at the end of the day, I genuinely cannot see Mbappe extending the contract. I truly believe that Mbappe will end up at Madrid. It's just a matter of when and not if. Obviously, PSG would want that to happen now. Mbappe might want to do it next year and pick his timing so that obviously the salary, the signing bonus sort of side of things go in his favor if he moves next summer rather than this summer. All of that put together, it's a very, very messy situation.
Well, look, with the fans, even if Mbappe decides to sign a new contract tomorrow, I think he has already burned that bridge. He on his interview, he said a lot of things about the club, about the players as well, which definitely I thought was not justified to the fans as well. And even if the fans see that Mbappe is actually putting all this charades just to get a new contract, it does not actually look well to the fans. And I certainly believe it does not matter if Mbappe stays for a longer time or he decides to stay just for a season. I think the fans are going to turn on him, and it's not going to be easy next season for Mbappe. And that might be another reason that Mbappe might want to leave PSG despite saying that he wants to stay for one more season. Mbappe is very similar to all those players who demands a lot from others, like the fans, the clubs. He wants to be protected. He wants to be flowered with support, money, and everything. He wants to be the center of the attention, right? And when he sees that that's actually not there anymore and people are turning against him, then yes, he might not want to stay there. And on top of that, I've also heard a rumor or news as well. I mean, that some of the PSG players did not like what Mbappe said in his last interview, and they complained to the president as well. So the dressing room will not be the same as what it was last season. There would be a lot of players who would despise Mbappe being there, and they will have some issues.
Definitely. It will definitely not be pleasant. And given all this drama, I do not see how this is resolved soon enough for PSG to have a good season, especially if Mbappe stays on for the entirety of the season. Moving on from Mbappe and a player with 1 year left on the contract, let's move on to the next one. It's almost becoming the second saga of this transfer window, which is the transfer of Harry Kane. Obviously, it's been well documented that Bayern Munich needs a striker, especially since Lewandowski moved on. Bayern initially thought that with their front line, especially after getting Mane, having Sané and Gnabry, Koeman, including the midfield of Musiala, Müller, they have enough goals in the team to cover up for the gap that Lewandowski left. But obviously last season has proved otherwise. And it seems obvious that Bayern has to get a striker. Now, their prime target is obviously Kane, and from all the news and rumors you hear, it seems like Kane is quite keen on the move, and I don't think there would be any issues on the personal terms side of things. The Bayern, although it does not pay a lot of transfer fees traditionally, they do pay high wages, and the rumored wage for Kane would be somewhere in the ballpark of £400,000 a week, which I don't think Kane would turn down, and it's definitely one of the better options that he has. The issue remains with Daniel Levy and Tottenham. Obviously, there has been 2 bids from Bayern that has been rejected by Tottenham. Now, how long can Bayern realistically wait before they move on to other targets? There has been talks about Julian Alvarez being touted by Bayern, which I feel like is a long shot. I do not think Pep would let him go, especially given the fact that he has recently signed a new contract, a long-term contract. I know Julian Alvarez doesn't play much at City, but I think he's important enough for City to not let him go, especially with the other departures that are happening. So Kane basically becomes be-all and end-all for Bayern, by the sounds of it at this point.
Most definitely, Bayern will end up with Kane. I can see that happening. But that being said, I did actually hear some rumors as well regarding PSG going after Kane. But I think that's only going to happen if Mbappe decides to leave this summer. Then there is a very big possibility that PSG might outbid Bayern for Kane's signature. Kane obviously has a lot of experience. Doesn't matter if he goes to PSG or Bayern, he's going to bring in a lot of quality to the team. He's going to add a lot more value. Saying that, yes, Bayern did actually had a prediction or assume that they would be well off without having a striker last season, playing Sané, Mane as well. But that did not actually happen. That did not end up pretty well. Mane punching Sané, so it did not end up well. Saying that, I do understand that Mane might be leaving this season as well. Bayern is actually trying to get rid of Mane. So in that scenario, Bayern will have the funds available to, if by any chance PSG decides to move in for Kane, then there will be a bidding war over there.
I think the other factor that you have to consider for Kane is that obviously PSG might bid bigger, but from Kane's perspective, I think the move to Bayern is more lucrative. And I think from what Willy Hoeneß said recently, it almost feels like there is some sort of an agreement between Bayern and Kane, as long as obviously Bayern can get to an agreement with Tottenham, that Kane will move to Bayern. Plus, Bayern, I think, is a more lucrative destination right now for Kane. I think between Bayern and PSG, it's quite obvious wherever he goes, it's more than likely that he will win the league in the respective leagues. The question becomes more about the Champions League. And obviously, Bayern won the Champions League, 3 years back? And it's almost the same team, barring Lewandowski. With that team and a manager in Tuchel who once again won the Champions League, a couple of years back, I think that's a much better combination than PSG, where the club's in turmoil. No one really knows what's really happening with Mbappe. The dependency is not just on Tottenham selling Kane. The dependency then also becomes what Mbappe decides to do. And I almost feel like at this point, Kane would just want to avoid that whole drama. I can't see Kane going to PSG. It would really surprise me if that happens. But the question once again goes back to the point that Bayern can act patient. Realistically, I think there is a point where Bayern will have to make a call and say, we can't wait for Kane any longer. We need to fill that void. No disrespect to Choupo-Moting, but I don't think that really works for Bayern. And going into another season where they will have to compete against Dortmund and just scraping to win the league the way they did last season, it definitely needs addressing their striking options. And I was just actually thinking about what other options are there in the market for Bayern, because Julian Alvarez, as much as the newspapers are talking about him, I genuinely do not think that as an option. Juventus' Vlahovic is a possibility, although I don't think that's on the same caliber as Kane, obviously. One left field option that I was thinking of earlier is Lukaku. Chelsea definitely wants to sell him, and that might be a backup option that they can go for just to fill the gap and have a player who is willing to prove himself, especially in a league where it's pretty end-to-end, a lot of counter-attacking football. And I feel like those sort of scenarios play in favor of Lukaku, and he might fit well. I'm not saying he'll be brilliant in the Champions League, but at least in the league, that might give them a bit more of a boost.
Lukaku at this point has become, even though he's a good player, but I think that clubs are not willing to take that gamble. Harry Kane obviously is a better option for any club, let it be Bayern or any other club. Right? I remember Real Madrid were pursuing Harry Kane before Mbappe broke out the news that he's not going to extend his contract. And I genuinely thought that, if Madrid goes for Kane, Madrid will get Kane. But I think the interest from Mbappe changed Madrid's plans for the summer. And Lukaku, I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, I do not agree that he has what it takes. He can't play as a second fiddle just to put in the goals in normal matches and all. But paying that much salary for a player who has... he has proven himself before, but he does not have that thing in him anymore where he can change matches or he can provide a lot of goals or something. And paying that much salary for a player is kind of not the way to go right now for any clubs. And that might be one of the reasons that, I know that he was in Inter was doing good, but then again, Inter themselves are not going after Lukaku. And pretty much, I'm pretty sure that if Chelsea are willing to sell Lukaku, and if they don't find a suitor, he's going to end up in the bench.
That is very true in terms of him ending up on Chelsea's bench. And I don't think Chelsea wants that either, because they definitely need to recoup money, especially with the amount of spending that they had over the last 12 months. Obviously, they still want to get a few more players, and getting them won't be easy while Lukaku or other players like that are not offloaded. Saying that, I don't think Lukaku's wage structure would be much of an issue for Bayern. His transfer fee, I think Inter fell off on the transfer fee. I don't think they could come to an agreement with Chelsea. Obviously, Chelsea paid a lot of money when they brought Lukaku back, and I think that becomes a bigger problem for Chelsea to write off a huge chunk of his transfer fee. It's a very interesting situation. Like many other clubs this this transfer window, it seems like there's a dire shortage of good strikers, essentially. The other issue, obviously, Bayern has, which you sort of touched on, is Mane. Obviously, Bayern does not want to keep Mane anymore. They want to sell him. Mane, on the other hand, has shown, or at least communicated, that he wants to stay at Bayern and prove himself. From reports that I've seen, it seems there is some interest from Saudi, but it doesn't seem to fit Mane's expectations or what he wants for the rest of his career, or at least at this point of the career. But if he has to move, where does he move? Is there any option that you can see? Because I genuinely don't see much of an option elsewhere within Europe, at least the sort of teams that he might want to go to. I can't see anyone who's really picking Mane up at this point.
So what happened with Mane this season, last season at Bayern, did not actually portray a good picture for any of the clubs. I mean, yes, he might actually end up in Saudi. That's a destination that he's more likely to go to. But in terms of his career, in terms of his ambitions, I don't think a lot of clubs would be willing to take that, because it's all about discipline, and you don't want a player like that in the dressing room to disrupt the dressing room, to disrupt the atmosphere over there. And saying that it's very similar to, I was actually kind of touching to Lukaku regarding this as well. I mean, yes, he did not do anything like that, but there's a certain aspect, a certain expectation in terms of forming and building a team. It's not about only tactical positioning, tactical play. It's also about gelling up with your teammates, getting to know each other better. And Mane at this stage, I think a lot of clubs would be avoiding that because they don't want to have that kind of atmosphere or that kind of dressing room set up again, where it might just happen or it might not happen. They don't know, because this thing never happened in Liverpool. But I know at the same time there were a few rumors of Mane and Salah not getting along during a couple of years back in Liverpool. But at the same time, taking all these things into consideration, I think Mane, at this point with his age and everything, I think the best destination for him is actually to go to Saudi.
I mean, I understand that very, very much, but I think it's a bit sad just because when Mane left Liverpool, it was this feeling that he'll finally be out of the shadow of Salah and he'll shine as his own person and also show that how important of a player he was for Liverpool, and he does not need Salah to provide the same level of performances. Obviously, while he was at Southampton before, did very well, and that's why he got his move to Liverpool. And in all honesty, if you look at Bayern's or Mane's start at Bayern, he started very well. He was scoring goals. He was doing very well. Then he got his injury, and I think that's where the frustration started. Obviously, the dressing room incident with Sané did not help. But even when he came back after the injury and played, it almost felt like he's lost a bit of pace. And one of the key attributes that Mane always had was his pace, being able to run past defenders, run behind the line, which I think adds to the reluctance of other clubs to go for Mane at this point.
There aren't enough clubs for Mane to go to, honestly. As I said, with his age, I know he has quality. I understand that he lost his pace, which was actually one of the key parts of his game. But at the same time, it happened. It happened to a lot of players before. I've seen players who were more reliant on their speed and all. Once they had a very big injury and they could not get back to the same pace, their career pretty much ended. And I'm not saying it's going to end for Mane, but at the same time, everything comes into consideration in those parts, like his injury, his ability to bring up that pace, his communication with his teammates, his disciplinary actions. Because I remember Bayern actually suspended him for 2 weeks, if I'm not wrong, and that does not add a good value to your CV. So it's actually one of those things. I'm sad to say, and I'm sad to see that Mane is in a position like that, because he's a brilliant player. He was a brilliant player. I mean, even with Liverpool, he was absolutely. I actually liked him more than Salah. He did more than Salah. I mean, Salah was scoring a lot. Salah. Don't get me wrong, Salah is a really good player as well. But I actually felt Mane was the backbone of Liverpool, especially with the attacking. And moving from Liverpool to Bayern, I know a lot of things has changed. It's a new club, it's a new country. So yeah, a lot of things might play in those things that he's not fitting in well. But then again, even if he's not fitting in well, you can't actually hit your teammates. That's a red flag for any club. Even I'm pretty sure if even Bayern right now sells money for like 20, 30 million, a lot of big clubs will not go after him. Liverpool won't go after him right now, given his age, his injury.
That is true. That is true. It seems he's almost destined to Saudi. Talking about Saudi, obviously one of the biggest coups that they had this transfer window, at least, was getting Benzema over to their league. And that brings us to Real Madrid for a bit. Obviously, losing Benzema is a big loss to Madrid, especially his leadership, the quality he brought up front. But I have to say, Madrid has done some pretty good business this window so far. Obviously, got Bellingham for a 100 million transfer fee. They also got Arda Güler, who I highly rate, and I think there were reports about a lot of big clubs around Europe chasing Arda Güler, either for this transfer window or the next one. They're sort of trying to prime it and put the finances together. Both these players, very young, very talented. I don't think Arda Güler would start initially, as a first 11, but I think as the season progresses, and especially going on to the future seasons, he'll become a key player to Madrid. But talk about Bellingham, I think that's a great player, great young player who Madrid has got, and especially seeing his interviews after the transfer, the way he's carried himself since his move, it does not feel like moving to Madrid has phased him. You know, some players, when they move to big clubs like Madrid, I'm not saying Dortmund was a small club, but then Madrid is definitely a step above. And when some players get these sort of moves, sometimes, especially at that sort of an age, players become nervous. They feel a bit out of place. At least, I don't know, he might be feeling all of that inside, but at least from the outside, the way he has sort of carried himself, it seems like he's pretty much at home.
Yeah, I've been watching a few clips from their training. I've seen Arda Güler and Bellingham as well. They're actually gelling in pretty well. They're actually doing pretty well in the trainings. Especially Arda Güler, I've not seen him play before. I've heard about him. I've never seen him play before. So when I got to see him in action, and I was pretty surprised, he's actually very good. He reminds me a bit of Ozil and a mixture of Zidane as well. And in terms of Bellingham, I've seen some clips where he surprised me, honestly, because, when you get into a new team, you're a bit shy, you don't actually know what to do much, but it felt like he was taking control, he was taking that step forward, taking the ball forward and, finding the right passes. And yeah, things are looking really good with Madrid. I can definitely say the new season that's going to come, I think Madrid's going to be a very, very good challenger for City in the Champions League, at least. And that'll be very exciting to see what happens there. And with the formation, I know that Ancelotti was talking about changing the formation a little bit with 4-4-2, and that might be actually a really good formation if Madrid does not end up getting Mbappe. And players like Vinicius, Rodrigo, they all get to play. Right now, the only thing that I can see, if actually Mbappe comes in right now, there will be either Vinicius or Rodrigo has to sacrifice their starting 11 spot.
Definitely, I think the formation one, it shows the change that Madrid's going through as well. I think for the last decade, maybe even longer, Madrid's always played a 4-3-3 or some variation of a 4-3-3. You can pretty much go back to the BBC days, or even before that, even when Maria was playing instead of Bale. It made sense because you had three outstanding forwards, three outstanding midfielders in Kroos, Modric and Casemiro. The formation almost picked itself rather than the manager having to sort of come up with a certain shape. But obviously now that Madrid's sort of moving into a different time, a different era, it makes sense for the formation to change. I almost feel, though, it'll be more like a diamond 4 in the midfield, especially with either Kroos or Tchouaméni at the base of it. I think Camavinga and Valverde could sort of play on the side and Bellingham at the tip of it, almost as the number 10. Obviously, you can swap around a few positions. Like you could easily get Modric in instead of a Camavinga, or sort of play Kroos a bit forward and have Tchouaméni sit back. There are obviously variations to that, and on top of that, you have players like Arda Güler and Brahim Diaz who can sort of fill in different spots. But saying that, although I like the idea, I like how Ancelotti is obviously planning now that Benzema's not there, how to sort of move forward without Benzema. But it almost feels like Bayern Munich version 2. It's the same thing when Lewandowski left and Bayern expected your Mane, Sané and Gnabry and everyone else to sort of chip in with the goals. I mean, don't get me wrong. I definitely think Vinicius Jr. is a good player. He can score goals. Rodrigo has slowly picked up his goal contributions. Bellingham, at least at Dortmund, has scored goals, so he can definitely contribute. Valverde can sort of chip in here and there. But I still feel that leaves a gap. It's almost the same issue that Bayern went through, where forget the whole Mane and Sané debacle in the dressing room. Even without that, they lacked a striker. They lacked that focal point. And especially when a striker of Benzema's quality, similar to Bayern, where Lewandowski left, when you lose a striker of that quality, I don't think you can just assume that the rest of the team will slowly pitch in here and there, especially if you think of Vinicius. I mean, yes, he does come in centrally, but off the ball, his tendency is to sort of hug the touchline, stay out wide. If you put him centrally, you almost lose his best attribute, where he makes those diagonal runs out from the wing and have that space to sort of build up speed, build up that momentum to go past defenders. And it's obviously, if you play centrally, it's harder to create those one-on-one opportunities where it's one defender versus Vinicius. There might be two centre-backs who are sort of crowding Vinicius. Similarly for Rodrigo, I think moving them in from the wing and playing them as pure strikers could work, but I don't see that working as well. Unless, obviously, now Ancelotti has this master plan where he essentially plays a false nine with, I don't know, maybe Bellingham or a Rodrigo, or maybe even Arda Güler plays a false nine, and Vinicius and Rodrigo stays out wide, cutting in at the end. So I genuinely think they need to get a striker. Obviously, Mbappe seems to be the prime choice there. It's just interesting, though, to think if somehow Mbappe does not move this summer, what are the other options? I mean, obviously they have got Joselu, but then Joselu, I think, is more of a bit part player, and I mean, he might come in late in the game just to give a different shape, a different option, but I don't think he's a starter.
You're right there. I don't think he's a starter as well, but that is something I was a bit worried about in regards to getting a world-class striker. That's why I said, like, I was a bit surprised that Madrid stopped chasing Kane in hopes of Mbappe. And as you know, it's a long saga. It's been going on for ages. And this is a gamble they took again this season by letting go of Harry Kane, sitting there just to see if Mbappe comes along or not. And at one point, I do understand a couple of things, that I know that Ancelotti is going to leave after this season. And one of the reasons I can see Ancelotti still in charge of Madrid is because of the young players that are coming. And I think Perez has this trust in Ancelotti, where the way he nurtured Vinicius and Rodrigo in the last 2 seasons, he has done a great job. And I think this is the reason that even if Madrid does not end up winning something big, he wants the foundation to be there, the foundation for Arda Güler, Bellingham, and the new left back, Frank Garcia. I know that a couple of players from the Castilla team are coming in as well. They're going to be pitching in as well. There's one of the very, very highly rated striker, like in Castilla, is Arvalo. So he played a couple of games last season, not as starting 11, but he came in and he scored a few goals as well. And I think this is one of the reasons why Madrid is still waiting on Mbappe and not going for another striker, because they already got Joselu, and then this young lad, he might come in as well if Ancelotti sees that, this formation is not working out with Vinicius and Rodrigo. They need a all-in-one striker, so they might actually look into Arvelo as well. Talking about Arvelo, I actually saw a really, really interesting news. I don't know if you heard it or not. So Sergio Busquets from Barcelona, he also completed his move to Inter Miami. He joined Messi as well, right? Now, the fun part was a couple of days back, not a couple of days, I think it was yesterday. So Inter Miami welcomed Busquets on their Twitter and Instagram page with Spain International Arbeloa's picture, which was kind of funny. They took it out, but it stayed for like 2-3 hours.
Oh, wow. I did not follow that. I knew Busquets was going to Inter Miami. I think Jordi Alba was already there. Did someone say Iniesta was going there in some capacity?
I saw the news, but I honestly thought he already retired. It's close to 40, isn't he?
Didn't he go to some club in Middle East? I can't remember.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, he left a season after Xavi.
Couple of seasons,
probably, yeah. So I was assuming that he would be close to 40 right now.
I think it's almost the last dance for that group. The only one left is Xavi to sort of quit managing Barca and just join into Miami for a season.
I'm pretty surprised that Beckham's lining up former Barcelona team being a Madrid player.
Yeah, true. Very true. Actually, haven't thought about that one. But just going back to Madrid for a sec. Obviously, I mean, what you said, I agree. There might be options with Joselu and the younger players that are coming from the youth team. But I still think that leaves a gap up front, especially if Mbappe does not come in, which might need to be filled with someone, even if it's a short-term loan from some other club. Saying that, other thing I suddenly was thinking is that Madrid has definitely changed their transfer strategy to some extent recently. They're obviously going for younger players with big potentials at a decent stage of their career. Bellingham obviously cost them a bit more, but then if you think about Camavinga, the other players they've brought in recently, which seems that they are obviously building for the long term, but that leaves some other gaps in terms of experience and leadership. Obviously, Modric and Kroos are obviously still there, and if you go through their recent interviews, the comments they have made about other teammates, I remember Kroos having very harsh comments about Bale towards the end, trying to hold the integrity of the locker room and making sure that everyone continues with the same attitude, the mentality, which is great. But with Benzema gone and a character like Mbappe, who has had all the privileges coming into the club, with essentially the only leaders left, in my opinion, in that dressing room being Modric and Kroos, who are towards the end of their career. In honesty, this might be their last season. In reality, I mean, they might still continue with the club, but I don't think they would play as much going forward. How do you think that would play out, especially if Mbappe tries to come in and run the dressing room the way he did at PSG?
That's a very interesting topic. I have been thinking about it, and I think I touched a little bit on our last episode as well, that I understand the privileges that Mbappe received from PSG over this few years, starting from getting him for, I think, 160 million, if I'm not wrong. So, yeah, I understand that there is a difference between him and all the players. Obviously, an ego will work on him as well when he comes in. I remember it was a very similar situation when Cristiano Ronaldo came into the Madrid dressing room. Thing is, it might not be a party at the starting of the season. It might not just go on really well. But at the end of the day, I certainly believe that Madrid will not let any player do whatever they want. They have that discipline, they have that integrity, they have that tradition of the club, and those are held really, really strongly by the Madrid hierarchies and president as well. I know that there were a lot of things said about Florentino Perez back in the Galactico days and all. But even if you look at the Galacticos, Ronaldo, Nazario, Zidane, Figo, when they came, they were very big players. But none of them had the privilege to do whatever they wanted. Even Cristiano Ronaldo, when he came, he started shouting for the first 2 seasons, but then again, he was not being able to do whatever he wanted. And that being said, I believe that will keep on going. In terms of when Mbappe comes in, he'll not be allowed to do whatever he feels like. He'll not be allowed to take everything for granted. Saying that, I know there's a missing leadership in the dressing room, especially if Modric or Kroos leaves next season. But I understand what you said about Kroos and I understand about Modric. But at the end of the day, I never actually saw them as like true leaders, just how Ramos or Benzema was. To be honest, I would definitely love Mbappe being present and being here presently if Ramos was here. If Ramos was here, I would say, you know what, Mbappe's ego does not actually matter anymore. But I do not think Modric or Kroos has that leadership or has that personality to overcome Mbappe's ego. But that has to come from a manager. And to be honest with you, this is how I think of it. And I do not see Ancelotti being that as well. So that comes to next season, not the coming season, the season after that. Or if Ancelotti decides to leave mid-season. That's when it goes on. Like, things will come around soon after Ancelotti leaves. Like, even if Zidane comes in or even if Xabi Alonso comes in, that's when Mbappe's ego will fall into place. Because at the end of the day, Zidane is a much bigger player than Mbappe. And I know that when Zidane came along, there were a lot of things on the BBC days when Cristiano, Bale, Benzema were like going around talking shit about coaches, like for example Rafa Benitez, which is justified, but then again. So during that time when Zidane came along, everyone was quiet, everyone listened to him. So you need that kind of personality in the dressing room, either in the form of a coach or a leader like your captain. So yeah, I think this transition, I'm not very keen about the next season for Madrid, but I am keen to see the foundation that Ancelotti lays for the younger ones and how they transit to a new team, how they bond, and how the next manager actually keeps everything in place.
No, I agree with that. I don't think the comparison to the Brazilian Ronaldo, Zidane, or Cristiano, as a matter of fact, to Mbappe, is absolutely fair because, I mean, Cristiano obviously came from the dressing room which had Ferguson in it. And plus, I feel like all those players, they were motivated to perform and build teams. And plus, like you said, obviously, when Cristiano went to Madrid, you had Ramos, you had Casillas, you had big names, not just big players, big personalities, which were already present at the club. It was very similar for Zidane, anyone before that, but the fact that Mbappe is going into the dressing room where it's a bunch of young players, some of whom might look up to Mbappe or want to emulate his level of success. And the leaders essentially are Modric, I think would be the biggest one. Kroos less so. Even less than that, you can say Alaba should become one, given his experience, his age, things he has achieved in his career. I personally think even a Casemiro would be better right now for Madrid. But given that's the scenario, it's almost going back to what happened to United over the last few years before Ten Hag came in. Because obviously, like you said, Ancelotti is not a disciplinarian. And I genuinely don't even feel Zidane's that. Yes, Zidane commands that respect because of what he has achieved in the game, both as a player and a manager. But saying that, if it goes on for a year, I'm just worried that the dressing room might become a toxic place where there are fractions and fragments which causes trouble within the dressing room, and you might need to sort of clear out a lot of the players just to clean things up a bit. And that'd be very sad, especially with the team that Madrid has sorted over the last few years, especially with the sort of young players and the potential that they have acquired. It'll be interesting. It's definitely interesting. It just might be the other way around as well. Like, I mean, the closest comparison I can think of, although not exactly the same still, is Gareth Bale. Is that when he moved, he was basically on the rise, and he did well initially with Madrid. I think it almost felt like he wanted more out of Madrid, or he wanted to sort of play outside the rules slightly, or at least, if not the rules maybe, but then outside the norm. And soon enough, yes, obviously his injuries did not help him. But at the same time, it almost felt like Madrid goes out of the way, don't want you as a distraction, and just pushes him away from the whole thing. And that is, I think, one thing Madrid has in its favor. I have to say, out of all the clubs around, I mean, I think Madrid is the best at not worrying about how much they have paid for a player and just considering what is happening right now. Like, you can go back to Michael Owen and Gareth Bale obviously has recently. It doesn't matter how much Madrid has paid or how important they might have thought you were when you came in. If you don't play by the rules, you're out regardless. And that might be the only fear that might work, but there is a void of leadership, especially after Benzema's departure.
Certainly. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know the new Madrid captain is Nacho right now. And if Nacho's not playing, then it's going to be Luka Modric. But I personally believe, I think the only player that I can see capable of bringing the leadership in the team is Courtois right now in Madrid.
That is actually very true. I almost forgot about Courtois, but yeah, I think that's actually a good shout, especially on the longer term. I think he's better candidate for a captain. That might be for the new manager once Ancelotti leaves to decide, which will then become very interesting. It'll be funny if Mbappe comes in this season, or even if it's next season, and asks for the captaincy straight away.
That's not going to happen. I remember very, very similar comments were made by Cristiano Ronaldo when he came in. Ronaldo never got the badge.
Yeah, I don't think Mbappe will get the armband either, especially not at Madrid. Anyway, I think we'll leave it at that for this episode. Thank you very much for listening. Please come back next week when we discuss more about the hot topics in football. Please like and subscribe, and do not forget to leave us a comment. We'll really appreciate your thoughts. Thank you very much. We'll see you soon.